the lily today, I'm just saying. Oh hey, hi, it's me, Wilma Fingerdoo with the Fingerdoo review of RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under Season 1, Episode 2. And before I even get started, I just need to send a shout out to Jane McNaughton from YouTube. She and I chat on the YouTube messages, and well, she's from New Zealand, and she's just very, very proud to see her little country with the big heart being represented on a global scale. Cooey Jane, I hope you're having a good day. Seriously. I also want to send a shout out to one of my Patreoners, Michael Bergantino, for these Australian and New Zealand flags. I forgot to put them up last week because, well, I'm an idiot. So thank you, Michael. I think they look great. Of course, I have to thank this week's tipperdoos, Catherine McReachin, who wanted to raise her glass to another season of fabulousness and reviews. Thank you, Catherine. And Gary Jensen thanked me for the entertainment I've been providing him throughout the pandemic. Shut your face, Gary. I'm so serious. I also have a couple of Redbubble models to show off this week. First off, James Montgomery modeling one of the latest Larda Souza illustrations. This one was inspired by the musical number Pet Me Papa from the film Guys and Dolls. Looking good, James! Seriously. And this is the extra gorgeous Jen Valier sporting Larda Souza's Seriously t-shirt with the help of her gorgeous kitty, Snickle Fritz. Seriously. Adorbs! These designs are just a few of the images you can order on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, magnets, whatever the hell you want on Redbubble. And that link is down below. Now, let's get to it. Jorge, drink me! Ooh, look at this. A nice fresh Fresca. Yes, Fresca. Tequila, you got some tequila. This is my lazy margarita, or as we call it here, the Wilma Rita, because my name's not Margaret. But it could be. I'm just. I also need to send a shout out to Percy Blue. I don't wear his jewelry enough, and I really love it. And I thought because I'm serving a blue fantasy today, I would just say thanks, Percy. And of course, this is the latest Denise Cherneau wig. I wore it in honor of this week's challenge, which was the Snatch Game, because this is Denise's Bet wig, a.k.a. Bette Midler. I feel a song coming on. Not a big song. Well, okay, no. Mostly it's a cocktail. So, we started this episode off with a very humbled workroom. The queens having to say goodbye to JoJo Zaho really brought the reality of the situation home for a few of them, I'm just saying. Of course, as Elektra removed JoJo's lipstick message, she breathed a sigh of relief for surviving the first runway of the season. As well she should, because that look was rough. Thank goodness for those dance moves is what I'm saying. Seriously. Of course, there was no moving forward without congratulating Karen from Finance winning the first episode of the season, as well they should. Art seemed to struggle with this. She apparently had issues regarding the judges' choices, and they weren't helped by the repeated kudos Karen got as the queens got out of drag. You could tell that more than a few of the queens were surprised that Art didn't win either. Not that they thought she did better, they just expected that she would. Even Karen was surprised that she had beat out Art. I mean, not as surprised as Art was. I'm just saying. I have to admit, I'm not surprised that Art thought she should have won, and maybe on another day of the week she would have, but on this particular day she didn't, and she was not taking it well. Burning looks at Karen and going around with a gob on her did nothing to hide her shock and disappointment. And I get it. She's an established queen who's worked very hard to be good at what she does, but this is a competition where spit and polish aren't the only things that are going to get you over the finish line. Were her runway looks gorgeous? Absolutely. But I feel that Karen from Finance's looks edged her out with their humor and whimsy. Plus, you can't win them all. I just hope Art doesn't eat her own heart out stewing over one near win when there are more challenges to come. I mean, if this is how she's going to be after coming in second, there's no telling how she'll do if she ever lands in the bottom. Seriously. Well, actually, there is, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The next day in the workroom, the queens were in brighter spirits. Well, except for Art, who was still chewing on not winning the last challenge, and Karen was loving it. The rest of the queens wondered what this week's challenge would be, etc., throughout the idea of it being a shoey. I have to tell you, I'm so glad the rest of the queens had no idea what she was talking about either. As Art said, it's when you shove some booze in a shoe and you scull it. How vivid. So the queens gave it a go. Well, Kita, Elektra, and Anita gave it a go, and it looked like there was a lot of booze in those size 14s, especially for it being first thing in the morning, I'm just saying. Although, I would have asked whose shoes they were before I started chugging. Just me? And then they were interrupted by a video message from Ru, who was doing her best Kylie Minogue impersonation. And by that I mean, it actually was Kylie Minogue in a pre-recorded, non-interactive video. Well, the queens were thrilled, as you can imagine, but they were even more thrilled when Ru entered the workroom with this week's Maxi Challenge, Snatch Game! Pow, 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 pow. On episode 2, clearly the queens were gagged. They obviously thought they'd have a couple more episodes to warm up on before this challenge came down the pike. Well, they were wrong. Right away, the queens got down to it by preparing their celebrity impersonations. More than a couple of the queens played their cards close to their chest by not wanting to tell anyone who they were doing. Those that did share their plans were surprised to hear that both Art Simone and Scarlett Adams planned to do Bindi Irwin. Now, it took me a hot minute to figure out who Bindi Irwin is. Of course, she's Steve, the crocodile hunter, Irwin's daughter, but her biggest international claim to fame was winning Dancing with the Stars in 2015. As a Canadian, I have no idea what she's been up to since then. I mean, besides getting married, no offense. So I didn't think she was a celebrity that was worth fighting over. Karen seemed to question Art's choice to do Bindi as well, which made me feel a little better about not getting it either. But Art was taking no prisoners as far as her doing Bindi Irwin was concerned. I think the shock of not winning last week was affecting her choices. Just saying. Because Scarlett had Jennifer Coolidge on hand as an option, and Art had only brought the one look, she was the bigger queen and acquiesced. Personally, I just think she was afraid to get into it with Art. Seriously. Those queens are scared of her. And can I just ask, is there some unwritten rule that says queens can't do the same impersonation? Seriously, nothing says I'm better than you than actually being better than someone at the same thing. Personally, I would love to see a Snatch Game where all the queens had to do the same impression. Now there's a Maxi Challenge. Anyone? Night full of bats? I'm just saying. Call it all bets are off. Kita Mean was knee-deep in her own struggles. She brought two options, Tiger King's Carol Baskins, barf, and Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss? Why would anyone want to do Dr. Seuss? Clearly, Kita wanted to show off how clever she was by not only doing a man, but doing a man who would have to rhyme everything. I mean, it's hard enough to be funny on the fly, but to rhyme while you do it? This had disaster written all over it, and Anita and Elektra were no help. They clearly thought the good doctor was a bad choice too, but then, this is a competition. Karen was another queen who chose not to reveal who she was impersonating. Well, at least not to Art anyway, but I'm sure that was more about throwing Art off her game. But when she did say she was doing Dolly Parton, I have to admit that I was worried for her. Dolly's not easy. That's why we love her. Then Ruth showed up to check on the queen's progress, and by progress, I mean choices. First up was Anita wigl'it. Based on Anita's accessories, a purse, pearls, and a hat, she was clearly doing Betty Mountbatten, aka Queen Elizabeth II. And it seemed to be a good choice because Anita had Rue laughing right away. Clearly, Rue's a bit put off by Anita's perkiness because she asked her what she's like when she's low energy, aka not on. Bless Anita, she's obviously been asked this before because her answer was that she doesn't have an off switch. I guess we just have to wait for her batteries to run out. Can I just ask, does anyone else find themselves clenching their jaws whenever Anita's on camera? There's so much tension in her face when she talked. I just find myself slowly doing this. Anyone else? Rue was being very kind when she told Anita that she loved her energy. Loved it! But was wondering what it would be like to explore those other levels of her personality, which was Rue speak for find the off switch. I have to say that when Anita did slow it down, she still had Rue laughing up a storm, which clearly worried some of the other queens, I'm just saying. Next up was Coco Jumbo, and everyone gagged when Rue called her new delusion from last week rotten. Well, don't sugarcoat it, Rue. How did you really feel? Coco's accessory for her Snatch Game was a flute, which was a hint that she was going to do Lizzo. Personally, I thought that was a good choice for Coco, but Ru was very quick to point out that when queens do celebrities they like, they usually get tripped up by not wanting to offend said celebrity. Something Coco assured Ru she had no problem doing. So she said. Etc. Etc. was next, and her choice for Snatch Game was Lindy Chamberlain, who was famously and wrongly accused of killing her baby when it was actually dragged off by a dingo. And even though etc. etc. had Ru laughing about how her mom used to say, "I hope a dingo doesn't get you," as she tucked her in at night, the other queens didn't see the humor in her choice. Or maybe they were just sorry they didn't think of it first. Either way, I was worried that etc. etc. admitted that she's funnier when she's not trying to be and tends to flatline when all eyes are on her. So the trick is to not have people look at her during Snatch Game. Maybe she should have done Madonna then. Art Simone was next, and she had Ru laughing at all kinds of things, which obviously worried the other queens. But what worried me was that none of what Ru laughed at had anything to do with Bindi Irwin. It worried me. We had no footage of Ru visiting with Karen, Scarlett, Elektra, Maxi, or Kita, but I can tell you there wasn't an Olivia Newton-John, Minogue's sister, or Guy Pearce from Priscilla in the bunch. Seriously, not even a Barry Humphries as Dame Edna? One of my Patreoners thought a clever choice would have been to do Barry Humphries and morph into Dame Edna during the Snatch. I agree. There's always next year. But there was no time for shoulda, woulda, couldas because it was time for the Snatch Game. This was a disaster if you ask me. No offense. I mean, Karen looked more like Lawrence Chaney than Dolly Parton and sounded like her even less, which would have been fine if she had at least been funny. She wasn't. I'm still trying to figure out what she was going on about with that turkey leg answer. Anyone else? For someone who was so adamant to play Bindi Irwin, I expected way more from Art Simone. I at least expected that she'd be funny. What she was long-winded. It was a long and winding road of her chasing jokes she never really caught. I was thinking it was because I didn't really know who Bindi Irwin was, but then I saw the faces of the other queens and I realized it wasn't me. I will say this though, even with that schmutz on her face, I loved her makeup. Gorge. I thought Coco looked fabulous as Lizzo, but that's where the fabulous ended for me. Coco on her own has way more personality than she gave her performance as Lizzo. And can I just say, if you're going to use a flute as a prop, hold it properly. You heard me. What, I was in band. Scarlett's Jennifer Coolidge was good if you had your eyes closed. She looked nothing like her in my opinion, but she at least had her sound bites ready to go, which was more than some of the queens. Personally, I would have liked to see Scarlett's Bindi, and I don't mean that in the sexy way. I'm just saying. I didn't get Elektra's Catherine O'Hara, but then I've never seen Schitt's Creek. I know, I'm a bad Canadian. Elektra also had the most awkward line of the night. You can't have all the pigeons, but when you do, they're probably Italian. No one seemed to understand what that meant or where it came from, so it wasn't just me. But her screaming Kevin was still funnier than what some of those other queens did. But still, I did like this makeup better than her usual face. I'm just saying. Maxi Shields' Magda Zubanski looked good, but looking good wasn't going to cut it in the Snatch Game, and Maxi just wasn't funny. Bless. Etc. Etc.'s Lindy Chamberlain wasn't the worst, although I'm sure more than a couple of the queens were hoping it would be. Her referring to a dingo eating her answer was hilarious. There, I said it. Kita Means Dr. Seuss started out on the right note, mostly because I'm sure she had written that opening line weeks ago. But when Ruth started asking her a question off the cuff, it became obvious that talking in rhyme isn't Kita's forte, nor was remembering that she was playing a man. Why else the answer to Ruth's question, "Do you like green eggs and ham?" Kita's answer, "Well, RuPaul, they're absolutely delicious, but if you ask me one more time, I may try and make myself your missus." Seriously, Reese's face said it all. Hope he doesn't get any online hate for it. I will say this, Kita did seem to warm up as the Snatch Game wore on, but by that time, who cared? Thank God for Anita Wigl'it is all I'm saying. Her Queen Elizabeth was hilarious. And can I just say, this was as close to off as Anita's switch has ever been. I didn't tense my jaw once. And boy, was she funny. Her answer about who needs a man when you have corgis and a jar of peanut butter was brilliant. And don't piss me off and wear a seatbelt as her secret to a long life was so funny. Because it's true. But the crown on that royal performance, just see what I did there, was Queen Lizzie saying, dry ass pussy. It ruled. Oh, I did it again. And then, thankfully, it was the next day in the workroom. And as the queens got ready for the runway, I have to say, I was amazed at all the unnecessary back patting going on. I almost laughed out loud when Scarlett said she thought that was the best Snatch Game ever. Personally, I thought Drag Race UK Season 1 was better. Anyone else? I do want to go on record as saying that I wish they would show us more of the footage from Snatch Game. I know we're shown highs and lows of everyone's performances that may not give us a true feeling of how it all went down, but as it was, this was still disappointing, and Ru all but said as much when she said the real winner was JoJo Zaho for not actually having to endure it. Seriously. Scarlett predicted that Coco would be in the bottom, and, well, she wasn't wrong, and Coco knew it. She admitted that she just froze on set and couldn't turn it around. Kita also thought she was going to be in the bottom and said that if she could do it all again, she wouldn't have done Dr. Seuss. But Karen had it right when she told Kita that she came back from that first awkward answer. Seriously. I was happy that Kita pointed out how proud she was of Anita Wigl'it, aka Ms. Wiggles' performance. The whole room agreed that she snatched the snatch, and Anita, bless her, couldn't disagree with them. Art tried to save face by agreeing that there clearly was a top and a bottom as far as performances were concerned, but in her opinion, the in-between performances were still anyone's game. Clearly, Karen didn't agree with her. She knew who was in the bottom next to Coco. Unfortunately, I think we all did. To change the subject, production got Maxi to ask the room how supportive everyone's parents were of them doing drag. For the most part, everyone's parents seemed supportive. Well, except for Coco, whose dad seemed less than pleased, although she didn't go into it. But Anita could relate. She told us when she was 7, her parents split up and her dad said to her, "Promise me one thing, promise me you won't turn out gay." Oh, my heart nearly broke for Anita right then and there. That's a lot for a small queer child to deal with, growing up with that gem stuck in their head. It's a good thing that even with all that hurt, Anita can still love her father, even with him being a world away. Sure, that has something to do with it. I'm so serious. Can I just have a minute to call out production and the editors? I mean, whose idea was it to cut from that tearful moment with Anita to product shots of Makeup Revolution? Way to kill the mood. I mean, I get it, they're sponsors, but they couldn't use those shots at the top of this scene when the queen started to get ready? Seriously. And then it was time for the runway. Ru looked okay from the neck up. At least she seemed to have solved whatever wig issue she was having last week. But that outfit, you know, it keeps getting harder to watch her judge the queen's runways when she wears things like that. I'm just saying. Of course, Michelle Visage was there. Where else would she be? And this time her silver streak was rocking out some big old 80s hair. Reese was there as well, rocking his impersonation of Tilda Swinton in the Conan O'Brien story. Do you remember Conan O'Brien? No, me either. Category is Sea Sickening. Art Simone was first and she looked good. I gave her Mermaid Sea Witch a Fingerdoo immediately. Those nylon glovelets were serving me flipper realness, which is a good thing because both nylon glovelet and finger realness were my drag queen names in high school. Kita Mean's jellyfish fantasy was also a Fingerdoo for me. From the spiked wig and headpiece to the sheer layers of that dress, she was giving me underwater buoyancy. And I didn't even ask. Etcetera's deep sea diver was definitely related to the sea, but it was far from sickening for me. I thought it was too simple. I would have liked to have seen more runway under that ocean is all I'm saying. So I gave her a finger don't. The best thing about Coco Jumbo's runway was that wig. It was everything. And although she was channeling some Ursula realness, I felt that without that wig, she could have worn that dress for any occasion. So I gave it a finger don't too, regrettably. Anita's sexy siren was lovely. It's hard to sell that wind-blown wig look at the best of times, but I think that her outfit helped sell it. So I gave her a finger do. Maxi Shield's mother of pearl was a bit of a stretch for me, but Still gave it a Fingerdoo. I would have liked it more if there had been some oyster shells on it somewhere, or maybe putting a big one behind her head. That's what my last boyfriend said. Electra's outfit was another one that could have been anything with a different wig, and that green one wasn't selling me seasickening as much as seasick. So I gave her a Fingerdoo as well. I absolutely loved Karen from Finance's shark-inspired sequined hoodie jumpsuit. That shark mouth cowl was fabulous. I even liked it when it was lowered and she revealed those fishy earrings. How could I not give it a Fingerdoo? Seriously. Scarlett Adams was another one with a showstopper. Her Great Barrier Reef fantasy was so beautiful that I gave it a Fingerdoo as well. Seriously. And then it was time for the judges' critiques. Right away, off the hop, without any warning, Ru announced that this week's winner was Anita Wigl'it. Well, of course she was thrilled, although it's hard to tell from the expression on her face. And for her troubles, she got a cash tip of $5,000 from Barefoot Wine Australia. That's $2,000 more than Karen got last week, so I'm sure there's going to be a discussion in the workroom at some point. Just saying. Ru also announced that ketamine and etc. were both safe, so they all frigged off, thankfully. As for the rest of the queens, no one was safe. They were all up for elimination. You could actually hear their butts clench being told that. Art Simone was first. As far as her performance in Snatch Game, Michelle went right in by saying Art did one thing and not much more. Thank goodness Michelle loved her runway at least. I feel that Reese hit it on the head by saying that Art is known to be funny. So for him, it felt like she went into this thinking she was going to be okay. And then she wasn't. Coco Jumbo was next, and she knew what was coming. No one liked her Lizzo. As for her runway, cute as it was, Michelle didn't think it was sea-sickening enough. Just saying. Maxi Shield was next, and Michelle thought her Magda Zubanski was perfect. Even Reese thought it was, but both agreed it wasn't funny. As for her runway, Michelle didn't think it was the best. See, neither did I. Electra Shock was another one the judges had trouble with where the Snatch Game was concerned, but at least she was interactive and they all agreed that she was funny and fun. As for her runway, Reese boiled it down to one word. Basic. Thank God that Karen from Finance's runway killed because her Dolly Parton didn't. Michelle had a good point. Dolly is so iconic that if you're not an actual Dolly Parton impersonator, don't bother. She's not wrong. Last but not least was Scarlett Adams. No one had too big a problem with her Jennifer Coolidge, although Ru did point out that Scarlett was just parroting out most of her classic quotes and not really much else, but at least they all loved her runway. Who wouldn't? Back in the workroom, the Safe Queens were shocked to hear that everyone else was up for elimination. I'm glad that Karen said out loud that she agreed that every queen that was on that stage should be practicing their lip sync. Although, before anyone could get to that, they got a surprise pre-recorded message from Dannii Minogue. At face value, it was a lovely effort by production, but I still don't understand why they blew their Minogue wad in one whole episode, especially when neither Kylie or Dannii did anything for the show, other than slap their faces on it. Just me? When the queens returned to the runway, it was announced that Scarlett, Karen, and Electra were safe. As for the bottom three, the queens were beyond gagged when it was announced that Maxi was safe and that Coco and Art would be lip-syncing for their lives. Gasp. Right away, as the queens started lip-syncing to Ru's I'm That Bitch, Coco ditched her skirt and sold the hell out of that song. I was surprised that Art didn't do better. She may be a great performer, but she's clearly not a lip-sync assassin is what I'm saying. So even though it gagged the other queens, it was no surprise to me when Ru announced that Coco Jumbo shantaed and that Art Simone sashayed away. Going into this season, I bet no one could have predicted this happening, least of all Art, who was so upset that she wept openly as she left the stage, poor thing. Back in the workroom, a producer off camera tried to console Art by saying that at least she was there. Art's response was, "It means nothing." The look in Art's eyes was haunting. I get it. She went into this season knowing she was the strongest queen there, and that may be true, but this is a contest show, not life. Being the strongest has nothing to do with it, or else Electra would have been the first to go. I'm so serious. Art said it'll be hard for her to live this down, but something tells me that'll be down to her more than anything else. All I can say is that I hope this shocker kicks the other queens into high gear. There are no guarantees on RuPaul's Drag Race, no matter what country they're racing in. I'm so serious. So, what do you think? Did Art deserve to go home? Do you believe she even deserved to be in the bottom in the first place? With such a heavy hitter gone, who do you think the front runner is now? I mean, Anita and Karen are the only challenge winners so far, but does that mean anything? What about Coco? This was her second time not impressing the judges. Could she be the next to go? How about Elektra? Do you think her basic drag will eventually trip her up? All we can do is tune into RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under next week to see how it all plays out. And when you're done, you come on back and you see me so you and I can compare notes. Now, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I'd really appreciate you doing that too. Seriously. And until next week, miss me! Mwah! Seriously. You know, I don't want to be the one that says karma's a bitch, but it sure as hell isn't an ice cream sundae either. Just saying. You know, for such a strong competitor, I'm so surprised that Art Simone took it that badly, I'm just saying. I hope she realizes that the only person she really let down is herself. I mean, I'm sure her friends and fans love her as much as they did, if not more after this, seriously. I bet she's wishing she let Scarlett do Bindi Irwin now. Seriously. That etc. is starting to impress me. She may be the sleeper agent this season, I'm just saying. One thing's for sure, next week is going to be interesting. The tension's rising.